Hey guys, it's Sloan, and I'm back with another movie review. This time I'm doing Dune, the 1984 version versus the 2021 version that just came out. All right, awesome. Let's just get right into it. Just a reminder, the way that I review movies is I put them into 10. I break it up into 10 categories of things that I think are important and make a movie a good movie. And I give them a score out of 10, and then I add all of that up to give it a total score out of 100. See kind of how it ranks. Those 10 things are plot, attraction, theme, acting, dialogue, cinematography, editing and effects, sound and music, directing, and the it factor. Awesome. All right, let's just get into it. Starting with the old one, the 1984 version, I gave the plot an 8 out of 10. I thought it was good. I thought the story was interesting. There was a good build, a good resolution. It was timed great. I was interested in what was happening. Yeah, that's basically all. Attraction, I gave the old one a 7 out of 10. I feel like this movie has gained attraction in the sense that the new one has just come out and it's kind of been hyped up, making people want to see the old one. For me, I wanted to see it just because I've heard about it. I've heard about it before the new one and it sounded interesting. I think the story sounds fascinating. While I was watching it, I was intrigued. I wasn't super bored and like, this is the worst movie ever. Yeah. Theme, I gave the old one a 6 out of 10. I could see the themes. There were universal themes that there are in all movies. I could see them. Yeah. Acting, I gave the old one a 7 out of 10. I thought it was great. I thought the acting choices that they made were great. I could see the characters' emotions and the conflicts that they were dealing with inside. Yeah. The only reason I didn't give it a higher score is I just have a personal bias against 80s dystopian films because I sometimes think they're weird and I think that they could go other directions with certain things, but I understand that was like the style of the time. So, dialogue, I gave the old one an 8 out of 10. The dialogue was interesting. It felt realistic for that scenario without being too basic. I actually really liked their narration of their thoughts, which technically isn't dialogue. That's more of a monologue. Because they're not talking to a person or another character. But I thought that was interesting. I felt like it helped explain the character and helped you see into their insight a little bit more. Yeah. Cinematography, I gave the old one a 5 out of 10. We've come a long way in films. So just kind of taking that into effect, but also on that same side, like for that time, it was very impressive and it was good cinematography. So I liked it. I did think there were some really beautiful moments, but then there was also some moments where I'm just like, why? That makes no sense. Why? Like it was mainly in Paul's dream sequences. They were trying to make it unsettling, and I just didn't understand why some of those things were in there, even other than to make it look cool. It kind of gave me like the Haunted Mansion vibes. I don't know. So yeah. Moving on. Editing and effects, I gave it a 6 out of 10. Again, the effects were impressive for that time period, especially the sandworms. Those have gotten a lot of praise throughout the years about how amazing those were for that time period. But yeah, it doesn't compare to today. We've come so far. So trying to put myself in those shoes of what it would be like at the time, I feel like they were good. But some of the choices are just weird. I just don't like. I have a personal bias, and this is my own opinion. This is not factual in any way. I don't like the style of 80s dystopian. They just don't feel unsettling, which is what they're supposed to feel. They just feel weird. Sound and music, I gave the old one a 7 out of 10. It was good. It seemed fitting for what was happening in the movie. I liked it. It was interesting to listen to. It wasn't overwhelming. It fit the pace of the movie. The only reason I didn't give it a higher score is because there were like 3 moments, and they weren't long at all. They were super short, but they had like a guitar. They were like guitar solos, and it felt like I was at a rock concert, which did not fit the style of the movie. But that was only 3 instances, and it was super short. Other than that, it was super good. But for those things, I didn't understand why there was a guitar solo happening. Directing, I gave it a 7 out of 10. Same thing I've been saying. I feel like it was good. I don't know what I'm trying to say. For that time, it was super good. All of the choices made sense to make it the big blockbuster movie that it became. But if those same choices were to be made today, there's no way it would have become the movie it has become. And that's the only reason I didn't give it a higher score, is because they were good choices, but there were some choices that I think should have gone different ways that would have fit the story a little bit better and made more sense to me as an audience member. The It Factor, I gave it a 7 out of 10. Again, this movie it's talked about. It's not something that's totally unheard of. And it was appealing. It was interesting. It was a good story. It's a fascinating concept. It obviously, like, it was not totally original. It was something that was kind of popular before it became a movie. Yeah, it was good. That leads us up to a total of 68 out of 100, which is super good. Most good movies fall in high 60s, low 70s, just kind of on the scale. So it sounds like it's not good. That sounds like a sucky score, but that's actually a really good score. Yeah, that's all. Moving on to the 2021 version. I gave the plot a 4 out of 10 because I did not like it. It was so slow. It was so slow. There was no conflict at all. It was just like a line the whole time. There was no build to anything and no resolution. It was just a line. And also, I was so confused on what was happening the whole time. They never explained. There was not a very good explanation in the beginning of who these people were, what they were doing, what they were trying to accomplish, why this mattered, why I should feel for them, or who I should be rooting for. There was no explanation. So they would just like throw out these names and I would be super lost. Or like with the Baron, I did not know who that was because they never said the word Baron. They had never explained who the Baron was. Or in the beginning, or if they did say Baron, it didn't like click with me because they had never mentioned it previously to that or why it was important. So as I was watching him on screen, I was like, is this the Emperor? Who is this guy? I do not know why he's important or what's happening at all. Why he hates these people. I do not get it. So I was just very lost. Attraction, I gave it a 5 out of 10. because I was so lost, I was so bored. I was consistently clicking and checking how much longer this movie was because I just wanted it to be over, which is so bad. Yeah, I was attracted to it in the sense that, like, it had a stacked cast. I was so excited for this film because it had a lot of actors that I really admired, and there was a lot of people working on this project that I thought was that I really like and I was attracted to. But just because I was so confused, it made it really boring to me. Yeah. For the theme, I gave it a 5 out of 10. I could tell the themes were there, but they weren't really as focused on as in the old one. They were kind of pushed to the side to make way for other stuff that didn't even make sense to me, and I didn't know why they were there. Acting, I gave it a 9 out of 10. Even though I did not know what was happening, I could tell that the acting choices were really good. There was a lot of emotion. I could tell that the actors were feeling that full range of emotion, and they were experiencing their own personal conflict. Yeah, the acting choices were fantastic. There's this one scene that Timothée Chalamet is in this tent fighting with his mother, and he's yelling at her, why did you do this to me? This is all your fault. And I thought he did a fantastic job. That the choices he made were fantastic. I could tell he was experiencing the full range of emotion. The emotion was so strong. I just did not know why he was yelling at her. But now that I have figured out why, because now that I've learned more about the story and I've kind of figured out why he was yelling at her, I can see how that acting has become much more impressive when you understand the story. Dialogue, I gave it a 6 out of 10. There was just, again, there was no explanation, and I wish there was more. Cinematography, I gave it an 8 out of 10. It really was a super cool movie visually. It was interesting to look at. The costumes were great. The sets were great. The lighting was interesting. The camera placements were interesting. It was cool to look at. It was visually impressive. Yeah. Editing and effects, I gave it an 8 out of 10. Again, we've come a long way in the film industry between, we've come a long way in the film industry, all considering effects and the way that they are produced. So I thought the effects were great, especially since this does take place in space, and they do have to have a different kind of style from what we would normally see in movies that take place today, not in space. And I also, I liked the sandworms. That's kind of the main editing aspect of both of these films, is the sandworms, and I did like that the way that they had come to light in this movie. They were good. Sound and music, I gave it a 7 out of 10. The music was super interesting. I felt like it fit the story of they live on this desert planet and everything is kind of fighting against them and trying to kill them. And it was interesting music. It was something that you totally would have never heard today. It's not like a classic style of music. It was interesting. It had interesting sounds. Yeah. My only complaint, so loud. It was really loud, and that's why I docked 3 points from the perfect 10, is because there were moments where it was way too loud, and I couldn't focus on what was happening because I couldn't hear anything. Directing, I gave it a 6 out of 10. There were some choices that I liked, but I do think it falls under the director's the director to make sure that the story fully comes to light for the audience and that they understand what was happening, and I did not understand what was happening. So yeah, the It Factor, I gave it an 8 out of 10. I was willing to watch the whole thing. That's all I'm gonna say. It had a stacked cast. It had people I liked. It looked cool. It was visually impressive. So I sat through the whole movie. Yeah. That leads us up to a total of 66 out of 100. So the old one had 68, the new one has 66. They're pretty close. I like the old one just a little bit more. I did like the new one. Again, I'm saying a lot of bad things. There were also a lot of good things. But there were bad things that kind of counteract. So they were both good. I recommend them both. My only thing is, don't watch the new one first. Yeah. They were both good. But they both had their high points and their low points. Yeah. I liked the story. I thought it was interesting, and I thought the concept was interesting. I watched the new one first. That was a mistake. I would recommend that you don't watch the new one first. Either watch the old one or read the book before you watch the new one, because you will be very lost and very confused on what's happening. I was super confused. There was not really any explanation in the beginning of who the people were, what they were doing, and what they were trying to accomplish, and why what they were doing and what was happening was important. I didn't see that at all. The movie looked cool, and the acting choices were impressive, but it kind of didn't matter because I did not know what was going on, and I didn't understand the story at all until after it was over and I had watched the old one, and then I had looked back on the new one and been like, oh, I see now. That makes sense. Along with the plot of the new one, there was no climax. There was no climax or resolution. Just a super, super slow build that led to nothing. It did build. There was a tiny, tiny bit of a build, but it never led to anything, which made it kind of boring to watch. But I do think that part of that was that I did not know what was happening. I think now, if I were to watch it again, now that I kind of understand the story a little bit more, I could see the build a little bit more. I was impressed with the cinematography and the editing. The effects were well done. The world was intriguing to look at and to watch. It looked realistic. It felt realistic. The old one's effects were also impressive for that time period. They made an influence in the world of editing for dystopian films. With that being said, it was exactly what you would expect the editing of a dystopian film in the 80s to be. Exactly what you would expect. They're all the same. So that's kind of why it's not my favorite. Not my favorite editing I've ever seen, is because it's 80s dystopian. It's very basic for that time period, and it's not my favorite. But it was impressive, and I could tell the impressiveness at the same time with all of that. They kind of canceled each other out a little bit. Going back to the music, they were interesting. I felt like they fit the world. I actually really liked the way that they fit the idea of them living in the desert, and they're kind of fighting for their lives, and everything is fighting against them. And it was also, I felt like they fit that, but along with the lines of being in a different time than today. Again, there were moments where in the new one where it was too loud, so it overshadowed what was happening on the screen. Maybe that's why I was a little lost, because they might have been explaining something, but I didn't hear it. And with the old one, I didn't understand why there were guitar solos in certain points. Yeah. There was like 2 or 3 moments where there was something that was unnecessary and it dragged me out of the moment and it kind of made me sad. But overall, it was good. Also, I liked the timing and the length of the old one over the new one. They were the same length. They were both 2.5 hours. But the old one put the whole story into one film, while the new one split it into separate parts. And I just felt like the splitting it was totally unnecessary, because there's really only one climax. There was really only one major conflict that they had been leading up to, and it wasn't in the first part of the new one, which made it seem totally pointless to split them up. Also, it slowed it down a lot. It slowed down a lot of parts that did not need to be slowed down. And that made it kind of boring, where it was like, when are we going to move on from this? This is taking forever. I've been watching the same thing for like 20 minutes and I want to move on. Yeah. That's all my opinions. Again, these are just my opinions. This is just what I think. I would recommend both of them. I thought they were great movies. However, this is my one important note that I would like to make. Make sure you know a little bit about the story before watching the new one. Whether that's watching the old one first or reading the book, whatever you want to do. If you're going to watch the new one, know a little bit about the story before going in. Otherwise, it might ruin the experience for you just a little bit. But that also does not mean don't watch the old one at the same time. Don't just like research it and totally skip over the old one, because that one was also excellent. And I kind of like that one a little bit more. So I would recommend both of them. I think they were excellent movies. Yeah, that is all I have to say, I guess. That is all for my Dune review. If you found this helpful in any way and you liked what I had to say, make sure you like and subscribe. Awesome. All right. I'll see you guys next time with another review.